Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a fun one, a nice high ABV beer from Hoppin Frog. I've had a few of their beers, they've all been great. This is a brand new one to me. This specific beer is called Frogichlaus, or Frogichlaus, is I'm sure how most English-speaking people would pronounce it. This is specifically a Swiss-style lager. Now, they call it specifically on the bottle a Swiss-style holiday lager. This one has been bourbon barrel aged and clocks in at a very high 12.4% ABV. Hoppin Frog is based in Akron, Ohio. So, Frogichlaus. This beer, I am nearly positive that they are kind of donning their cap to a very famous Austrian brewer named Schloss Eggenberg out of Austria, or as they would say, Österreich. There is a beer called Frogichlaus, very famously high ABV. They have a bunch of different versions, but their standard version of it, just the classic Frogichlaus, is a Doppelbock that clocks in, I think, somewhere 14, 15, 16%. Very, very high ABV indeed. A lot of people I've known that have tried to drink that one over the years have a very hard time and can't finish it. It's very pungent beer. And one of the many reasons I think that they're kind of donning their cap, paying homage to Schloss Eggenberg, is the font on here, where it says Frogichlaus is written in the exact same script that Schloss Eggenberg uses on their Frogichlaus beer. So different style. They call this a holiday lager versus a Doppelbock, but of course a Bock is a type of lager. So I don't think we're that far off the mark. This one's barrel aged. Honestly, I don't know if Frogichlaus comes in barrel aged versions. I've only ever had the classic. But nonetheless, I expect this is going to be quite nice, quite interesting. So really not that much else to talk about the label other than kind of the script that shares that similarity. So pretty cool. I have high hopes for this beer. I expect it's going to be packed with flavor. So we got this cracked. Let's just get this poured right in the old all-purpose Sam glass. Yeah. Give a little agitation. Give this one a chance to form a head. And yes, this is what they're calling a Swiss-style holiday lager. Okay. But it's quite dark, as you would expect the Bock to be. So again, I think we're seeing some more common ground here. Yeah, very kind of ambery brown. Pretty good bit of carbonation though. The head, you know, it didn't go crazy. It's got a little creamy bit kind of sticking to the rim. Had a little bit of a pad on top. But that's what it looks like. I can tell you, with the beer about a foot and a half from my face, I can really pick up that bourbon. So I expect when I get right up on it, it's going to really be pronounced here. Absolutely, yeah. It smells very strongly of bourbon. There's almost a subtle kind of honey sweetness to it and maybe some underlying kind of orange zest notes coming out of the glass. But the bourbon, as is typical, you're getting some brown sugar, you're getting some vanilla. So it really smells quite nice. They took the time to barrel age. In this beer style, I imagine it's really going to be quite prevalent. So without further ado, let's just jump right in, see what this one's about. Oh, that is a big beer. Big beer. Okay. So yeah, if indeed they are kind of paying homage to Schloss Eggenberg Frogichlaus, then well done, because this is equally huge. Just a big, pungent, flavorful beer. Wow. So, holiday lager, you know, call it what you want. At day's end, it's a big, bold, barrel-aged lager. It's very nice. It probably is the most akin to a Bock, at least in terms of ABV range, and certainly the flavor profile here. So, the bourbon does come on quite strong, and is very clearly has a bourbon flavor, but there is 100% this underlying vanilla that kind of comes off of it, as well as suggestions of molasses and brown sugar. I would say it's leaning stronger towards dark brown sugar versus light. Light really, if it were caramelized. So it's kind of binding that side to that vanilla undertone. There's also this almost subtle cream soda-like suggestion. So really, a lot of these overtones coming off of the bourbon addition and barrel aging is really playing into this kind of creamy, rich, almost dessert-like overtones into the beer. It's really, really quite nice. And yeah, this is clearly got a lot of fermentables in it. It is a maltier lager. Hence the depth of color and the very high ABV. So yeah, there is this sweet interplay with the bourbon barrel, but it's very nice. I would say it does remind me a good bit of a Bock in the way that it feels in the mouth and a lot of these underlying flavors. So there is a little bit of this kind of doughiness, this baked good, but it's richer than, say, that like that you would find in a Pilsner. It's much more akin to, say, whole wheat rich breads or cakes or something, almost carrot cake like, where it's got this density to it. It's got this presence. And there are these other subtle overtones and undertones of spice additions. So we've got this kind of orange zest quality that's coming out of it. And there is a little bit of a cinnamon suggestion without it actually tasting like cinnamon. I think it's the way all these flavors are melding that just throw all these extra bits and pieces you can pick out on the palate. And certainly the yeast plays its part, as does the malt bill. But overall, very, very nice. Big, bold flavors here. It's quite pungent. So I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel. Let's see if any flavors jump out at me on this second sip intensification. Think on the finish here, but very, very nice. This is an impressive beer. Body is a solid medium. It's not as heavy as you'd expect for 12.4%, but one of the differences between ales and lagers in general is lagers do tend to present themselves a bit more lightly than their ale counterparts, for whatever reason. Mouthfeel got a good bit of resistance to it though. Really got a good bit of resistance. It doesn't feel chewy, but it feels quite thick. So yeah, there was a little bit of that play. When you agitate around the palate, it does get a little bit creamy, but not over the top. So body and mouthfeel do kind of play up on that Bock side of things. Even though they're calling it a Swiss holiday lager, it is sharing a lot of commonality here. In terms of flavor intensification, yeah, the barrel just gets even bigger. The vanilla and all of the creamy kind of undertones and brown sugary undertones and spice undertones are all there. On second sip, there's almost this buttery quality to it. It's quite rich, as well as having these spice kind of suggestions and underlying kind of doughiness and malty undertones. There is this other richness aside from kind of like this cream soda side coming from the bourbon barrel, but there's this almost buttery sense to it. It's very rich. It's almost like dessert beer. That's really the best way I could describe this. It's reminding me of a rich, decadent dessert in lager form, and it is absolutely delicious. So the finish on this one, perhaps you would guess as much just based on the ABV range and the barrel aging, but yeah, it is quite long. This is a significantly longer finish than your average lager, to be certain. And certainly, as we've drawn quite a few similarities here to a Bock, quite a bit longer than that. Yeah, this is a big, bold beer. The barrel, I don't know how long they left it in the barrel, but requisite amount of time to really draw out additional flavor intensification and really help push out the end of that finish. How does it finish? It finishes nice and wet and round to the end. There's no suggestion of dryness at all. It's just a big, round, good-bodied, resistant, flavorful, bold, pungent beer that also at the same time doesn't really leave you feeling heavy. Like the sensation on the actual body, there's not a lot of heft to it. So sure, it's got presence, but it's not one that makes you feel sick in that sense. It's got a lighter side to it. It's just more dessert-like in the way that it presents itself. And it's very, very nice. Tons of layers of flavor here. Tons of character coming out of this beer. And I am a big fan. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, come up my scores. When we come back, I'll get this one ranked from top to bottom. All right, now it's time to get this one ranked. This is Hoppin Frog's Frogichlaus, a they term Swiss style holiday lager, 12.4% ABV, bourbon barrel aged. Hoppin Frog is based in Akron, Ohio. So starting with the aroma, maybe you don't expect this on a lager, but the barrel aging was very pronounced on this beer. And that's really what helped push it across the line. Now, you'll get a lot of aromatic notes in high ABV lagers, such as box, doppelbox, triple box, if they get into that, whatever they want to term it. But this was no different. And in fact, the underlying aroma and overwhelming sense I got from it was very much akin to a Bock, just with that added addition of the bourbon barrel, and it smelled absolutely fantastic, hugely pungent, layers of aroma. Aroma gets a 10 out of 10. For the taste was truly, truly delicious. Albeit 12.4, this was not a harsh beer by any stretch of the imagination. There was really no real sense of booziness. There was just underlying character imparted by the barrel in tandem with the yeast strain that they chose and a really rich, large malt bill, and it all paired together to make this beautiful, cohesive, high ABV lager that was just absolutely delicious, packed with flavor and tons of layering with it. Really, really delicious beer. The taste gets a 10 out of 10. For the body on this was a nice big body. It is a higher ABV beer. You don't normally get ridiculously huge and heavy bodies on lagers, but this was an exception. This is well above average. The body does get an 8 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this, quite a lot of resistance. Significantly more than your average lager, but again, this is not your average lager. This is 12.5%, nearly ABV. This is Imperial Stout territory. This is bordering on barley wine territory. It was really an impressive mouthfeel. It felt right. It had a good bit of resistance and viscosity to it without being syrupy. It certainly wasn't flat. And it did get a little bit creamy when you agitate it around the palate. Overall, just a very nice mouthfeel indeed. Mouthfeel does get a 10 out of 10. For the finish on this, another category where this is significantly longer than your average lager. But again, very high ABV, a lot of fermentables, big pungency of flavor, and of course that barrel aging to really help push it across the finish line. The finish does get a 10 out of 10. For the head and retention, this was really just average. It was okay. It had a hard time forming, but it did a little bit once it finally settled after some good agitation. And then it had a nice little creamy pad on top with a good bit of cling on the sides. It's more or less what I expect for a lager in this ABV range. Average, 5 out of 10. Appearance was really quite nice. Most people associate lighter appearance with a lager, but this being higher ABV, a lot more fermentables, a lot of backbone, a lot more roasting in the malt. Really, it looked kind of where I thought that it would. Much akin to a Bock. Very similar color profile here, and overall, it looked fantastic. Appearance gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was exceptional. The malt bill and the barrel aging, just top tier, for sure. I don't know exactly what malts that they used in here. I could take some educated guesses, but it was very, very well put together. The yeast strain was the right choice for the beer that they were making. And then the barrel aging was clearly a very high quality barrel for a requisite amount of time. The balance was just top notch. It does get a 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, subjectively, I loved it. Give it top marks, 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of this style, this beer swept most categories, just lost a few points in a couple categories here, notably head and retention. Not really that important in the grand scheme of things for what the beer is about and the type of beer they were brewing. Frankly, I think this is absolutely top tier for any kind of barrel-aged high ABV lager. No matter the sub-style or sub-categorization, they absolutely nailed it on this one. Example of the style does get a 10 out of 10, which brings the total score on Hoppin Frog's Frogichlaus to a 93 out of 100. So again, we're looking at yet another stellar beer. This is top tier, very far well above average. If you're a fan of barrel-aged beers, you like the flavor profiles of ales, but maybe don't like them to be quite so weighty, quite so heavy, maybe a little more easy drinking, without that boozy edge, This is one I can indeed recommend, and it should be reasonably easy to find until we get out of the winter months. So keep your eyes out. If you find any of these left over in your local beer supply store, I recommend grabbing them. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop on our videos, go live to YouTube. Just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.